Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on employee wellbeing in the remote workplace. Thank you so much for joining us, especially on this lovely, warm and sunny day. We have an absolutely brilliant webinar lined up for you, and we'll trust that you'll find it both engaging and inspiring. My name is Colette Hagan-Young, and I'll be guiding you through the discussion today. We're having a couple of technical problems just getting one of our guests on the line, but we will get there eventually. So she'll join us shortly. A little bit about us here at Cloud9 Insight. We are a business change consultancy. So what we do is we provide small and medium-sized businesses with Microsoft Cloud CRM systems, and we help them implement the business transformation that then goes with that. Our purpose as a company is to create the future of work, which has never been more timely. So now businesses are getting past the survival stage. We're starting to encourage companies to assess where they're at now so that they can start to grow and thrive going forward. So we have some wonderful guests joining us for the discussion today. So firstly, joining me as our host is our CEO, Carlene Jackson, who set up Cloud9 Insight in 2010. And since then, the company has provided over 700 businesses with Cloud CRM. Carlene's been listed among the top 25 culture leaders by Real Business, and she's often quoted in the media for her opinions on employee wellbeing and happiness. This includes platforms such as BBC Global, The Telegraph and The Guardian. Hello, Carlene.
Hi there.
So joining us from award-winning fintech company Futrli is Hanna Smith. She is the Chief of People over at Futrli and is also a mentor for other HR professionals outside of her role there. Hanna's received a number of professional recognitions, including the Sunday Times Best 100 Small Companies to Work For, Investors in People Gold Standard, just to name a few. Hanna was actually the People Director here at Cloud9 a short while ago, and we all agree that she's been a crucial driver for investing in people as a method for business success. So it's great to have you back, Hanna.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us from Breathe is the CEO, Jonathan Richards. Jonathan founded Breathe 7 years ago with the single plan to develop a simple and user-friendly HR software that's going to help businesses create engaged and inspired teams. Last year, he was named the SME Director of the Year in the London and South East Institute of Directors Awards. We actually use the Breathe system here at Cloud9, and we can all vouch for how great and easy to use it is. So it's great to have you here, Jonathan.
Thanks for inviting me.
And when Jelena can join us, we'll be delighted to welcome her from the Sussex Wellbeing Company. Jelena is the co-founder and programme director there and is a doctor of psychology working in the area of workplace wellbeing and burnout prevention. So before we get into it, we have a live Q&A running throughout the session. So please do feel free to post any questions as we go along. And if anything is relevant to a topic we're discussing at the time, then we'll be happy to delve further into that. Otherwise, we'll save all questions to the end. So please do feel free to chip in as we go along. So why don't we get started? Let's look by setting the scene. So let's look where we are now and define in really simple terms what wellbeing actually is and why it's so important for business owners. Hanna, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think wellbeing, well, it's now more so than ever. It's more important as we're living in this very, very strange times. But wellbeing, really, it's about looking after your whole self. The old adage that you don't bring just your work self to work, you bring your whole self to work. So it's looking after every single element in terms of your healthy mind, physicality. Are you eating well? Have you got financial well-being looking in place as well? And why it's important to business? Well, why shouldn't it be important to business? It's probably my turnaround question back, really, is that, you know, we all want to work in a place where we feel like we're looked after and supported. And I think we as employers, it starts with an ethical and moral point of view, what we should be looking after all of our employees' well-being, but also actually it has a direct impact to productivity and engagement. So the companies that want to survive this time and the recession are the ones that are going to be able to look after their employees and come out productive and profitable at the end of it. That's what I would say.
Lovely. Thank you. And I think, so I'm guessing most businesses have got past their initial teething problems now. So what are they going to have to turn their attention to? Jonathan, did you have any insights on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right that most companies have gone past the initial panic of how can we do this? How can we work from home? How can we get everybody productive? No, how can we keep the business running? If indeed the business is still running, because let's not forget there's a lot of businesses that are, if not over the edge, but teetering on the edge. So I think the important time now is to realise that we're in a transition stage. Everything's pretty much up in the air. Do we know where we're going forward? No. Do we know where we've come from? Yes. But do we really know how we got here? No. So, I think it's time as businesses to realize we're transitioning, but every individual in our business is transitioning in their own way. And I know what we're seeing talking to our customers and indeed talking internally is that people can go through multiple transitions almost in the space of a day.
Mm.
Now, somebody will wake up in the morning and think, this is just terrible. And then maybe the day gets going and it's not quite as bad. And by lunchtime, it's okay. And then something happens in the afternoon. And we've just got to be so wary about how things can change quickly. So I think it's all about almost at the moment living by the moment.
Mm.
Mm. Mm. And what do we think, especially at this time, what do we think are the main causes of employee stress and anxiety at this moment in time? Carlene, did you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So when the COVID situation initially came out, my thoughts were for my employees. We're obviously a people business. We might sort of work with technology, but at the end of the day, we're very much about the sort of people. And what was front of mind for me was the sort of job security for people, and just to try and make them feel that they didn't have to just go out and find a job, even if there were jobs out there, that just to make them feel secure in their role. So I think that's sort of front of mind. And there are a lot of people in my workplace whose partners have either lost their jobs or been furloughed. And that in itself might be outside your sort of peripheral vision of your day-to-day dealing with that person, but that can cause extra stress, especially relating to their finances, their ability to afford their sort of rent or their mortgage, and their sort of home place security. So just giving them a sense of job security, but also there's a lot of uncertainty at this time of change, where people are worried about, well, what is the company doing? So it's been really important to sort of make sure that there's frequent and regular communication that's sort of one-to-one, but as well as with the company, and there's a sort of transparency of what's going on as well, because I think people don't need more stress at this time. So just upping that communication, especially early on, was really important for us.
I think one thing, if I could jump in there, Colette, that I'm feeling is that each of us as individuals, our fight and flight muscle, if you like, if I can call it that, I know that's not the right term, but is constantly on alert. So we have so many different things going on in our lives, just in normal life. And now we've got that extra level of, as Carlene said, are our partners at risk of jobs? Are we at risk of jobs? Are we at risk of catching the disease? If we catch the virus, then what happens there? There's so much going on that our fight and flight muscle is constantly alert, looking out for us. And that's exhausting. Now, that's why we get to the end of the day and we're just exhausted, because of all the things that are going on in our brains just behind the scenes.
Yeah, and also the fact that we can't control any of that. A lot of to do with anxiety is this feeling of you're out of control, and of course all of those feelings, you can't rationalize all of those feelings that are happening around us, and you can't fix them. You just have to learn to be able to be comfortable in that moment. And you have to practice thinking in a different way almost.
So we talked a little bit about what well-being actually is and why it's important for businesses. So perhaps we need to think about how we can go about identifying and addressing any issues. So what kind of, this for all of you, are there any challenges that you're seeing and trends in how your team's being affected?
Sure, I'll jump in there. So I think that for my business that we actually have a lot of new employees, and so with that comes different challenges perhaps, because when you're new, it's great to have people around you that you can ask questions, and so that's been difficult, a transition for them to need to work from home. We've even had one new employee who started, who was sort of interviewed in person, but then their first day was actually, hey, you're going to be working from home, and they're 19 years old. So we've had to provide a lot of training for them. And when you're trying to, their particular role was working with a lot of different people from the company, it was definitely probably more challenging for that. And for my business, I had planned quite a lot of new hires and growth in the business since the new year. We had a significant growth of 60% last year. So you could say that sort of the first quarter was very busy for us. So we've gone into the second quarter equally busy on the project side, but it's put a lot of pressure because the growth plans we've sort of stalled. So we're sort of having to sort of revisit that. But I think it's also been very challenging for people to readjust on the video. I think naturally a lot of people are sort of probably don't necessarily like to be in front of the camera. So for people suddenly having to be exposing their home and working in front of the camera, that sort of probably causes stresses. Do I get dressed up? How is my hair? Especially for the guys, who would have thought they will worry about how long their hair is, and it's quite short to me. But
it's not getting any shorter, and I can't get it cut.
So yeah, so that's quite interesting. And then also sort of the technical pressure and the work environment. I think initially we just thought about the laptop as being one of the challenges, but actually, what about the workspace? Do they have enough lighting? Are they getting enough is their posture right? Are they going to have extra sort of backaches? Early on, I discovered that luckily the first few days, that somebody didn't have a desk, so they were going to work from their bed. I was thinking, oh my goodness, months of this would be crippling. So I was able to go and give them a desk and stuff like that. And so yeah, so there's a lot of challenges that are quite broad reaching, really.
I think also with the remote, we too had onboarded some people in Australia as well, so we were in a different time zone and they were working remote, so it really put us to the test. But actually, if we can't do it now, then when can we do it? So it was really a time to kind of rise up to the challenge. And we also had somebody in the UK start with us a week before lockdown went, so we had to very quickly pivot on all of the induction and on the onboarding, and it's worked out really, really well. And that's testament to a great culture as well. I'd put that back to you as well, Carlene, because you really need to rely on not just you as an employer or a leader, you need to rely on the rest of the team to connect well as well. But on top of those challenges, of the logistical challenges and the physical challenges, it's also the fact that you can't see someone's eyes where if they're experiencing a challenging moment, or you're not going to be able to bump into them when they have a cup of tea to say, do you know what, you don't look like you're okay. Is there something you want to talk about? And so any kind of chance conversation isn't by chance anymore. It's a scheduled one-to-one, or it's I'm just having a cup of tea. Does anybody want to join me in the Zoom room, or something like that? So you don't always have the ability to pick up on when somebody needs to hear a different voice or a different viewpoint.
Jelena,
sorry, go on, Carlene.
Jelena, what are your thoughts on what is it that employers should look out for in recognising that there may be sort of some issues there and challenges?
First of all, it's if people go quiet. So whether it means that they're initiating contact less, or whether it means that they're sitting in the meetings, but they're more quiet than usual, that's certainly one sign. Secondly, mistakes. I think that's obviously a sign, and it's not something to go, down on employees, very hard, like, oh, why did you make a mistake? But that's really a sign that this person is struggling. Also, how do they, it's always good, I don't know whether you've already spoken about it before I joined, but obviously using meetings, regular team meetings or one-on-ones to just catch up, how you're doing today, and notice if people are using more sort of emotional and negative language. That's certainly something to think, and asking questions, asking and starting from yourself, sharing, oh, I've had a really difficult day today, it was a nightmare. And then if you are starting a conversation with your team members in that way, so sharing some of your personal challenges, that might encourage them to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that as leaders that we're authentic. I sat in a meeting of 15 or so CEOs of small businesses right at the beginning of this, and it was just as it was all breaking and we'd all gone locked down and we were all trying to put in place our contingency plans and everything. And we went round the virtual room. How are you? How are you? How are you? And every one of us, we got to the end of 15 and every one of us had said we were fine. And I looked into the eyes of everybody in that meeting, because you stare at them, and I could see that none of us were fine. We'd all been working too hard. We were all too stressed. And why would we be fine? Because our businesses were being threatened. But we've just got to be so authentic about, yeah, this is difficult. It's okay. It's fine. It's difficult. Let's just accept that bit, and then we can work on from it.
Yeah, I think that's what I find even before, whenever sort of the topic of stress comes up in, like, for instance, employee stress management seminars. And it's always good to have managers and, if possible, senior management present there as well, because whenever there is a sort of discussion, let's say, how are you dealing, with sleep, what are the causes of stress? So hearing some of the, for employees to hear their managers saying, oh, my toddler wakes up 3 times a night, suddenly they become more human to you. So this is even under normal circumstances, but now we're working in some very exceptional circumstances. So just sharing that at the beginning of meetings, I think, creates space for employees to be more open and acknowledge their own challenges.
At the start of our regular meeting, so at the start of a leadership team meeting or a tactical meeting, we always have a check-in. And on the one hand, it sounds fairly mechanical, but we go around everybody in the room and everybody gives themselves a score, 1 to 10, on how they're feeling about the business and how they're feeling personally. And that is it's a mechanical thing, but it enables somebody to flag that they're not on good form. And it just means we go into the meeting doing it. We've set it up so that anything 6 or below, they get a chance to talk about it. And that means that no matter what they're scoring, if they want to talk about something, business or personal, if they score at 6, they get time. And that's I think it's such a good way of just bringing any issues to the front of the meeting. Because if somebody's not on form, you want to know that, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking at caring for our workforce at the moment, but what about those who are currently on furlough alongside our active workforce? How can we care for them as well? Does anyone have any insights on that? Hannah, maybe?
Well, I think it's vitally important that you're caring for those people on furlough, because we want them back. We've only furloughed a small handful of people, but it was to take advantage of the only help that we were eligible for at the time of the government business. We need them back as soon as we can have them back. So the things that we've been doing is we haven't shut them out of everything, because I think a lot of employers were nervous about whether they're working or not working, and what we can and can't ask them to do. So we use Slack as our internal messaging communication system. So they can dip in and out of Slack if they want to. We're not asking them to, but they can if they want to. We have an company all hands on a Monday morning And on a Friday morning at the end of the week, all of the team leads present what everyone's been working on that week. They're welcome to join those meetings if they want to. If not, they're recorded. They can dip in and dip out whenever they want to. At the very beginning of putting them on furlough, I curated a load of lists because there was, I don't know if you remember, but certainly as a mother, there was loads of advice going around on WhatsApp of this is a virtual tour here, or David Walliams is doing this, and Joe Whips is doing. It was really helpful, but it felt a bit overwhelming at the same time. So I curated loads of lists of what companies were doing what virtual tours, and also local suppliers who were delivering food, who weren't delivering food, who was offering online free learning resources, all of that kind of stuff. So I did that at the beginning, and then weekly I've been in contact with them just to see how they are. I wrote them some handwritten cards just to say, just still thinking of you, we're here. Those small little touches mean the world to them, and it also means the world to us, because I want them to know that they're really important. And this week as well, we launched our a health and wellbeing programme that is going to last at least 12 weeks, and we have a programme of activities, challenges that people can join in if they want to. And I really thought about all the different personalities in our company. So the photographers, the sporty ones, the foodies, all of those kind of things. So every single week there's a slightly different challenge, and we've invited them to join that as well. So this week, for example, we've invited everyone to share something with the theme water. They can interpret it as they wish, whether that's a photo of something with water. It could be tonic water. I think mine will be. It could be anything, but it's just something to break away from the norm. So in a very long answer to your short question, it's really important that you keep in contact and you keep the furloughed people engaged.
That's great.
And I think also, just to add to that, I mean, we haven't furloughed anybody, but we obviously have lots of customers who have. And I think it's important that you try and keep the relationship going between those that are furloughed and those that aren't. Because pretty soon we're going to have a time when people are coming back from being furloughed, and the ones that have been furloughed may well resent the fact that they've been shut out from the business, especially if they haven't been kept in touch with. But equally, those that are still in the business may well resent the fact that the others have had a holiday. So there's an interesting one there about bringing the two back together, and I think getting them together while they're apart is really important, just to keep that conversation, keep those relationships going.
I agree, yeah.
So what if we think about any kind of no cost, low cost options, just tips and ideas for boosting that well-being? Has anyone got anything that they swear by that is good to do?
Well, all of our health and wellbeing programme was no cost. So there you have to be creative, but there's lots and lots, especially now, there's lots of offers and lots of free resource out there. So I curated lots of different pieces, but into sections. So created a monthly financial budget tracker for them. So and was in contact with a financial advisor that we've worked with in the past. They're going to do some free financial wellbeing talks and some free one-to-one advice if people want it, because there's lots of questions. Should I move house, for example? Should I increase my pension payments? All that kind of stuff. So we've done financial wellbeing. We've given some advice on physical well-being, mental health well-being, ergonomically, are you set up correctly at home, and some advice and risk assessments on all of that, and then the weekly challenges. So all of that is free.
And what about things like kudos and recognition and praise? I know that's something that we try and do at Cloud9. We have sort of a weekly heads up, and we try and encourage everyone to give kudos, no matter how small the task. I mean, Carlene, you were quoted in, I think it was Employee Benefits magazine. You spoke to them about how employee recognition is really important for morale, I think especially at this time.
Yeah, I think definitely. People often, when they talk about the different generations, they say the younger generation need a lot of feedback, but actually I think all generations need that. And there's nothing more powerful than giving timely feedback. In our business, we use Microsoft Teams, so we have a chat called Fun and Good News. And so if there's ever any feedback from clients, or somebody's done a really great job, maybe building a demo or whatever it might be, people are great at sort of putting that good news in a really timely manner. And that means I become aware of that as well, so I can sort of join in with the kudos. And it's really nice to see everyone's sort of likes and things like that. And so that's great to do. And so we encourage in our team meetings as well to sort of give that sort of kudos where recognized. It's hard sometimes because I think everyone deserves a lot of recognition, but it's also great. We're lucky that we have a lot of partners and customers. It just seems that a lot of people are being extra nice at this time. So there's been a lot of opportunity actually from outside sources as well to use that kudos to share with the team, which is sort of free magic in a way to perk them up.
One of the things.
Go on, Jonathan.
Thanks. One of the things that I think is so important, and it's old, it's sort of almost a bit of a cliche, but it's communication. And I think at this time, basically, you can't communicate enough, and that's at a group level. So we've pretty much taken every regular meeting and stepped up the frequency. So we as a leadership team, we used to meet monthly, we now meet weekly. We used to have a weekly all company meeting. We now have 2 of those. One-to-ones. Everybody in the company has always had a one-to-one every week, and we don't step that up. But if you get together, then I'd start from the point that as a fundamental basics, what most people tend to want from their businesses, I think, is they want to know where we're going. They want to know what's my part in getting us there. And they want to know how we're doing. And each of those, the majority of people in businesses can cope, whether it's good news or bad news. They want news.
Yeah.
So if it's not good news, then treat them like adults and tell them it's not good news, but tell them what you're going to do about it and what their part in that is. So I think whilst it's old stuff, it's old how everybody says communicate. But actually, it's so important now, and it's so easy to overlook it. Now, you can wake up in the morning as a leader and have a bad day and think, I don't want to present to the whole team. Actually, yeah, I do, because that will get my day better, and actually, it will, we'll just keep everybody in touch with what's going on.
Yeah. And to add to that, Jonathan, I think it goes back to your original question about why people may be feeling anxious and what we can do to kind of help them and about job security. It's that the communication goes hand in hand with that. And if you don't, I think we've been led to believe because of the media that no news is good news, but actually that's rubbish. No news is bad news, because if you don't over communicate, even if you're not saying anything different, you're just re-emphasizing the same message about where we are, where we're going, what's left to do, etc. You almost need to become a bit of a repetitive robot. But if you don't do that, people will start to write their own narrative, and they'll start to input where those gaps of communication is. They'll start to make up little stories in their head. Well, I haven't heard anything, so it must be bad news, or I haven't heard anything, so I can't be working hard enough. So it's really, really important, really important.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things, communication is key, and regular meetings, but it's very easy to get lost, especially in bigger meetings, in bigger groups. What I mentioned earlier about people going quiet. So it's very easy to overlook somebody's struggle. Even with those check-ins, how are you feeling? Sometimes people will be happy to flag it up, and sometimes they won't be happy. So we really need to pick up the clues. So I would say maybe things like peer-to-peer mentoring. So pairing employees, and to keep an eye out for each other, maybe catch up during the week. So it could be pairing them up, or it could be creating small groups of maybe 3 to 4 people and encouraging them to keep in touch and look out for each other. I think that's a very useful tool.
And I suppose looking out for each other, it's quite topical this week because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and we've got real focus on kindness this week. So I guess I'll direct this at you, Jelena. How can businesses incorporate this into their strategy, the well-being and mental health of their staff?
Well, it is very much like we said earlier. You know, even saying thank you. So we were talking about giving kudos and giving people shout out in the meetings, which is fantastic. But even just regular things in an email, if somebody does something well, to actually give them praise. And I agree with Carlene, it's not just for the younger. I think everybody thrives on praise. And it is really about showing an interest. So being proactive and showing that you want to help and support somebody. So it's harder, obviously, in this remote working situation, but it's not impossible. And it all, again, comes down to communication, but creating space in these regular meetings, creating space for people to not just share how they're feeling or specific challenges that they're facing, but also talk about positive things. So making almost like a regular part of a team meeting a question, so what have you been up to this week? What are the sort of things you enjoy doing? So similar to what Hanna was saying about these well-being challenges, but this is kind of approaching it from a different angle. So doing it in a more naturalistic way, so getting people to share what were the things that they were enjoying. And again, you know, a manager or a clever leader can pick out from that who's volunteering, you know, who's sharing more positive things, and those people who aren't sharing, again, you know, then approaching them maybe in a more private meeting and seeing how they're doing. So those are all kind of signs. So showing goodwill, but also using that opportunity to pick out on people who are really maybe not in a very positive frame of mind.
And what about things like holidays and taking time off? It's a very strange time at the moment, but what do we think about employees taking their breaks? And they should be encouraged to do that, shouldn't they?
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an argument to say that, you know, we can't force people to take holiday, but you can drop some pretty heavy hints when we get a really interesting insight in that, because Breathe is used by our 8,000 plus customers to manage their holidays, apart from other things. And we saw an instant spike in the usage of the holiday part of the system, and it was cancelling holidays. So, you know, tens of thousands of people across the UK were cancelling their holidays. And now we're starting to see it creep back in. But whereas a 2-week summer holiday was cancelled, the odd day here and there is coming back. So, for instance, you know, there's a lot of our team, and we can see others that are taking time next week because it's the school holidays. And that's so important that people realise that they just got to have a break.
It's really important. I mean, we too had at the beginning, we had a lot of requests for cancellations of holidays, and actually we're trying to get a new product out the door, which we will hopefully launch in the next couple of weeks. So actually, in a way, it was beneficial for us, but we've got to be really careful that people don't burn out. We had requests, can we work bank holidays? And you know, everyone needs a break, even if it is just, you know, going from the kitchen to the lounge and not from here to Portugal, because it's very unlikely. We all need a break, so we are actively encouraging people to take a break. And we might get to the point where, you know, from a practical point of view, we don't want a bottleneck of holidays for the rest of the year. So we might ask people to take, you know, a couple of long weekends every month for the rest of the year, because it's important that they get the opportunity to just shut off and to just recalibrate and re-energize in whatever way they see fit. Otherwise, you're going to get burnout. We're not going to get innovative ideas sparking the business, and ultimately, it's going to make people ill.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest danger of remote working, and we have certainly noticed that even before this COVID. So, for example, in company, this is not just for holidays, it's also for sick leaves. So for example, in companies where some companies' senior management team would be sort of more likely to be working from home. In one company, I remember seeing that the entire sort of annual sick leave in the senior management team was 0 days. So 0 days sick leave for, I can't remember how many senior managers were there. Now, those were the people who are mostly working from home. You can't tell me that they were absolutely healthy 365 days a year. They had no, children off school, or anything. So that's the problem. That's a real problem with remote working. That because we have the luxury of sitting on our own sofa or in our own at our own desk or kitchen table, that we then think, okay, well, I'm feeling a bit run down today, but I can work. I don't have to commute, and that is the problem. So we really have to bring the message home that, like you said, holidays are important. Although holiday doesn't necessarily have to equal travel. You need a rest at home. But secondly, we need to address the issue of sick leaves, because I imagine there will be a problem now that people are thinking, well, I have no excuse not to work today, although, I have, I'm running up a fever or, so yeah. I think that's...
Just at the start of the COVID situation, we introduced a new concept of additional personal days, so people can have 4 additional personal days. So that's could be sort of, you could say, offered by the manager or requested by the employee, and it might be that maybe they've been working on a busy project and would just probably value and appreciate some downtime, or maybe it's their birthday, or there might be something that they need extra time with, and that they don't want to use their holiday for, and that they don't have to call. It's not formally sick leave, but they just need some time and space. And so I think that's been well received by the team. And in addition, I think it was in the news last night that the New Zealand Prime Minister was talking about the fact that wouldn't it be great if there was a 4-day working week, maybe more people would visit tourist spots. I'd love, as a sort of ambassador for creating the future of work, I'd love to think that more employers would be more flexible about embracing the concept of a 4-day working week. I can only imagine that at the end of all of this, that people will value some of the great positives of this experience of being able to enjoy more family time or more things on the things that they really like to do, and less commuting, hopefully.
We've had quite an interesting question come through, actually. So we're talking about needing a break for your mental health. What if an employee says that it actually helps their mental health to work? So if we're trying to kind of encourage people to take breaks, but someone says, well, actually, it's good for my mental health to work, how would we deal with that?
Well, we have got some situations like that at the moment. Actually, it's a good distraction for them, because but I think it's about talking to them about it. Don't just accept that. I think they might be right. It might be a good distraction for them, but it's not sustainable for a long period of time. So I think everyone is different. But it's going back to what we said at the beginning about looking for those signs. Jelena was talking, if they're going quiet, also if there's any mistakes in work, but also if they're working too much, we have to look at it that point of view. So it might be a good distraction for them, but try and encourage them to take a break in a different way, or just say, okay, this is fine for now, or I agree with you, but I do want you to book some time off in a couple of weeks' time, and go and read a book, or give them a takeaway voucher or whatever it is, and to let them know that everyone needs to rest. Often in technology, though, in our little bubble of technology, engineers will do that in their spare time anyway. That's what they'll do, and entrepreneurs and business owners will work anyway. There's never a day off if it's your own business, right?
Yeah, right.
Everyone needs time to recharge their batteries. It might not be a whole day, might not be a whole week, but everyone needs some time. And I would just talk to that individual and encourage and try and tease out what it is that will give them the break.
There's something I'm very big on, which you touched on there, Hanna, was that we as leaders in a business who should, and a lot do, spend their time looking after their people, actually we need to sometimes spend a bit more time looking after ourselves. You know, it's the put the oxygen mask on yourself first. That we need breaks, and not only do we need breaks, but we need to be seen to be taking breaks. We need to be seen to be being sick. You know, we're leading by example by being sick. It's flagging that it's okay. It's flagging that it's okay that our kids come into the middle of conference calls, because that gives everybody else permission.
Yeah.
No, so let's just be the real people that we are and recognize that just needs to happen.
So we've had another question come through about technical staff. So engineers and developers often shy away from wanting to talk about anything at all, let alone well-being. They often like to be left alone. Any ideas on how we can engage them effectively right now? Over to you guys.
Well, talking from experience, engagement, because I think working in a healthy remote working team, and that's our main priority as a business this quarter, is to create a healthy remote working team. And the guys who run GitLab wrote a really good book called Remote, and it's quite famous, and obviously everyone's now reading it frantically. What makes a healthy remote team? But the thing that makes a healthy remote team is trust, engagement, and connectivity. But how do you measure engagement when you're not in the same room as them? So I think you can measure engagement in different ways, and I would say don't trial something, but don't give up. You might get loads of people engaged in this first thing you do, or it might be the last thing you do. Just don't give up. And when, you know, no one size fits all, to try something different and talk to them. If they're not interested in health and well-being, fine, it doesn't matter. Talk to them about, you know, what they're doing in their spare time. They'll have outside interests. They might be keen photographers, they might be keen artists or gardeners or whatever. Just try and find something that's going to connect with them. Don't tarnish them all with the same brush.
Yeah, and I think it's, if we have really good relationships within the company, but if I try and connect one-to-one with one of our most techie developers, that's not going to work. You know, we can have good conversations and everything, but if Gareth, my CTO, tries it, he speaks the language. Or if I've discovered a week or so ago that we've got a little gaming group going on. Now that's not a world that I partake in, but they have a fantastic time, and good for them. They're just gaming, and that's their way of talking to each other. So it's finding ways to connect with them in the way that they want to be connected with, and that's a great label to put around technical people, but actually it's true of everybody. If we get to know the people that work for us, we get to know what are their buttons, we get to know what it is they do, so we can have the conversation about gardening because we know they're into it, or we can sympathize with them because they're into marathon running and they can only go out for half an hour a day. We get to know what to talk about them and how to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great skill. When we outside of the world we're living in right now, when we talked a lot about one-to-ones and how important they are, we all realise they're really important. But there was a really great TED talk. I think it was a TED talk. It was a talk anyway, and by somebody called Lara Hogan, who she runs development teams, and she's often brought in as a consultant. But she put together some really great templated questions for one-to-ones. So you could start by, you know, one of your questions should be is, you know, how do you like to be recognised, and what do you do in your spare time? Those kind of things. So it's almost like an interview question, because not everyone wants to be recognised company-wide. Somebody might want to be recognised quietly, and actually putting them at the forefront of everyone might be their worst nightmare. So the skill of really great people management is knowing what each individual, what makes them tick. So find out, I would say, don't be scared to ask the question.
I would also say that things to look out for, although it's much harder, obviously, in this remote working situation, but it is irritability and anger and frustration. So obviously people are going to find it much easier to control their anger for the 1 hour duration of a Zoom meeting, and then they might explode later. Whereas if they're in office 9 to 5, they're more likely to have slight sort of outbursts. But it's certainly irritability is a very sure sign of a stress overload. Mm-hmm. So either if somebody's showing some signs of anger, not just necessarily anger, but frustration, maybe getting frustrated with a client or getting frustrated with what the project they're working on or some problems. So look out for those signs of frustration. That's really important. And or even try to initiate conversations where people might share, but that's just trying to be alert to that particular aspect is very important, because if somebody bursts into tears in front of you, then of course you will understand this person is struggling and you would want to help them, but not everyone is going to to show sadness or anxiety. Some people might show frustration or irritability, so it is good to try to find that.
Mm-hmm. We've had a couple of questions come through, kind of dealing with some similar aspects. If the leadership team are working under pressure from clients and communication has dropped with employees, how can we help encourage the importance of value of communication within the team and ensure it isn't currently seen as unproductive time? And also we've got someone else who is struggling with it, put a lot of wellness content on their intranet, but stats are saying that the people aren't really engaging with it. So maybe it is going back to then again, maybe people seeing as it's not important, or employees not really valuing, not valuing, but maybe not seeing it as the most productive use of their time. So how can we what kind of advice can we give them to engage with these employees?
To answer that, the last question first, from my point of view, I think just look at the content of what you're doing and what are you offering, because health and well-being, I mean, the phrase health and well-being itself in companies has been around for many years, and it's often, or has it, not often, that's unfair for me to say, but it was originally thought of as weekly yoga sessions and a fruit bowl. But of course we know it's much more than that. So just have a look at what you are offering, and have you asked your staff what they would value. There's no point offering mindfulness classes if actually that's not what they want. They want some ideas on how to do some healthy cook-along recipes, for example, or financial well-being. So just check the content is relevant to what is needed. Look at it almost like from a marketing perspective. You look at your client personas, look at your employee personas. What is it that they want at that time? And then I would just find some advocates in the business that can be your champions. Line managers are, depending on how big the business is, but line managers are the pinnacle to success in any business. And so any kind of top-down communication or bottom-up initiative or anything like that, the success of it and the engagement levels are going to depend on the connectivity of that line management layer and how they talk to their staff. So I would really probably emphasize the engagement there, because you need to look at it like from a one-to-many rule, I would guess.
I would just say that I think that I was on a call actually this morning with some external partners that I work with, and they were noticing how they feel they have less thinking time. And I would say because they used to commute maybe a way to work or between meetings, and that was really good thinking time, almost like strategic time. And I would say, yes, I think a lot of people would say that productivity is probably up at this time because people aren't commuting, they're at their desk probably ahead of time that they might have been otherwise, and there is no sort of between meeting commute time. So I think that organizations should recognize this and build in extra downtime that might be a half day a week where they sort of have something to work on, something that interests them. That could be an innovation for your business where they come together as a team and think about new products and services, or maybe something that's completely outside of the work. It could be more just create some fun time with their family, because I suspect one of the sort of the people who are really challenged at this time is maybe those parents, the often mums who have to try and keep their toddler away from the dad. You can't communicate with the toddler and say, hey, dad's at home, but he's working. And that must be a particularly stressful situation, I imagine, for a lot of parents who have that new situation, which has good and bads. Because I know in our team meeting, we were there when our sales director saw his 1-year-old take their first steps, and that just reminded us how lovely it is that in this moment to be able to appreciate times like that.
I also think if you're struggling to get the leadership or the management team to understand the value of communication, I tend to think of it that recruitment is all about marketing now, and managing existing staff is all about account management. So if you think about how you would want to account management your best clients, do that for your employees. So you don't keep your best clients in the dark about stuff. If there's things going on, you talk to them. If they show any sign of concern, you're picking up the phone and you're ringing them, you're calling them, you're all over trying to anticipate what they need. And that's the way that you manage your people, I think, nowadays in the modern world. So you can definitely do too much. You can overmanage people, but it's pretty hard to do that. You know, you're going some if you do manage to overhelp people or overmanage people. But just think about them as if they were your most important client, because fundamentally they are your connection to your most important client. Put them the other side of the company client wall, and all of a sudden they become your client.
Yeah, and you know, a company, you're all in it together. It's not just the leadership team making the company successful, it's everyone. So I think, you know, don't think that you have to communicate with a PowerPoint presentation and some graphs and some charts. You know, challenge anyone to have a weekly or every other week 10-15 minutes, just all hands Zoom, and just to talk about, to your point, Jonathan, where are we now versus where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? Just some relaxed conversation, just to say, this is what we're working on, guys, at the moment. You know, maybe apologize for a bit of quietness, but you know, we're going to be heads down, but please be aware that my door's always open. You know, just something, just to hear that voice and just to see a face. I think it's a real powerful leadership tool.
Yeah, I have to say that there is a fine balance between communicating enough and communicating too much. And this is coming back to the question of all this well-being content that's been made available on the company intranet and nobody's really engaging. Well, if you think about it, that's although it's well intended, but it's still just another thing for people to do, sitting in front of the computer, and that's very tiring. So it's not going to be effective. We want people to engage, and I agree. I think presenteeism, I'm not aware of it being measured lately, but I imagine presenteeism is at an all-time low at the moment, because people really, when they sit at home to work, they really get on with it because they have 10 other things waiting for them to deal with later. So people are productive, but we need to not give them extra work to do, and engaging in well-being content in this content in this situation is one more thing to do. So it's more about creating a culture of well-being through using the team meeting time, as we said earlier, to engage, create platform for people to share their interests and also how they're feeling. Yeah, I think that's certainly more valuable, and educating people about the importance of breaks and so on. So giving them time to rest, to avoid the Zoom fatigue, maybe even sometimes choosing the non-Zoom options for some collaborative project. Yeah, sometimes just sharing files and with clear notes could actually be more productive than discussing a project or discussing a file while seeing, because the Zoom fatigue is a very real phenomenon. I have to say, I embraced Zoom to begin with, and now I'm finding it, all this sort of visual, that they can be quite exhausting because our brain has to deal with so many things at once. So, yeah.
I had it described to me that too many Zoom meetings particularly on Zoom or Teams, we use Teams internally, but too many of those that are ad hoc, it's like somebody keeps coming back to your desk. And that's going to get annoying after a while, isn't it? Somebody
I never thought of it like that.
Every 20 minutes, somebody comes and taps you on your shoulder and says, hey. But even then in the office, that's less likely to happen because somebody will look across the office and see that you head down busy. Now, I've actually just in the hour or so before this call, I've just taken the dog for a walk and had a meeting. So he took his dog for a walk. I took my dog for a walk. We were on a phone call walking through the countryside. It was just brilliant. So yeah, shake it up a bit. Zoom fatigue, you're right, is real, and it's exhausting.
So I mean, we're talking about shaking things up, and I think before we wrap up the webinar today, we talked about the office and what do we think the new norm is going to be in a post-COVID world? What changes are companies going to have to make in order to adapt to the new norm and embrace the employee well-being that goes with it?
Well, I think we have, I was on a talk the other week by Bruce Why Sussex did the Talent Fest virtually, and Bruce Daisley was talking about the last 4 weeks or 6 weeks has seen about 10 years of innovation in terms of the world of work. So all of those, flexible working won't work. You can't manage people remotely. You need to be in the office. That's all rubbish, as we now know, right? So we're not going to have. I mean, we knew it anyway because we're all sensible people, but. But I think everyone's enjoying the flexibility. So I really do not want that to go, and I don't envisage that going. If anything, I think it's going to create more opportunity for us. If we do, we certainly are going to be remote for the foreseeable. So actually that widens our talent pool because it doesn't matter where those people are sitting, which will in turn widen our employer branding. So I think actually it's a real opportunity for us all to kind of step up to the plate and really, really be advocates of the future of work, like you're saying, Carlene. I think now is the time. This is it.
I would just say that I'm hoping that organisations will be a little bit more flexible where they can. It's not always possible if you're client facing, but even in the hours that people work. I know when I was studying years ago, I found that my optimum time was actually 10 at night till 2 in the morning, believe it or not. So giving people flexibility that they can adjust and sort of work at different hours to suit them, have their afternoon siesta or the 2 hours of lunchtime with their family, as the Europeans often do. We did a survey recently in the team to just gauge those, if you could come back to the office in May, who would want to come, and nobody said yes. I'd like to think we have a nice office. A few people said maybe, and it was also sort of a clue in a sense of how much people have actually enjoyed their time working and having that flexibility. I think a lot of people did say they wanted the flexibility to choose sort of when they came in and when they didn't. So I think there's definitely a strong desire for people to, you could say, be more flexible in the future as well. And I think the role of an office will change as well. I think that certainly when I go and visit some corporations like Microsoft and their head offices, they have more sort of working spaces that are more like akin to lots of sort of unique living rooms designed by Italians that are sort of these beautiful spaces with even like Lego boards or whiteboards or with beautiful sofas and coffee tables or cushions or and I think that in this future, I'd like to think that work offices might be sort of places that you really want to be, that are really harnessing your creativity and enabling collaboration, even with those who want to be remote or those who want to get together. And in businesses like ours, where people and relationships are really key, I suspect there'll still be a strong desire for people to come together. So I think work spaces will need to address that and be flexible spaces to address that.
I'm very excited actually about the change that's upon us. I really think it's opening up. So there are certainly challenges, but there's so many opportunities, as both of you have just mentioned. But it just So in the future, so maybe in a year's time when things stabilize a bit, certainly companies will have to find a way to accommodate, to include the learning and development and well-being activities, again, sort of provide them remotely as well as in-house. But overall, I think there's many more pros than cons. But there is one very important thing that employers have to be very careful about if they want to prevent burnout and ensure sort of sustained productivity over a longer period of time. And it is creating very clear boundaries. Because the problem, even before this COVID situation, was always that people who are working remotely, they're permanently switched on. They're permanently switched on. So it's very important that there are some boundaries set as to when it's acceptable to send emails. And certainly managers need to lead by example there. So there has to be a team-wide policy when people are not supposed to send emails or respond to emails. And it's slightly different for companies that have worked with clients in other time zones, but there are ways to go about it. So it is very important to be clear about that, because otherwise you really, you really create perfect conditions for burnout.
I think also there's a couple of things that I would be cautious about. One is, if we're going into a deep recession, which there seems to be, you can say what kind of a letter, is it going to be a V or a U or a W, but we're going into a very difficult time. And I think in a very difficult economic time, the gains in flexibility, in agility that we've made over the last 6 or 8 weeks could so easily be lost, because for so many businesses, it's going to be a case of survival. And when it's survival, you go back to what you know. So some of the gains can be lost, and that's something we need to watch out for. But equally, I think, we're sitting here in the tech bubble, as Hanna said. For us, working from home, we transitioned from home overnight to working from home overnight, so it was easy. But for a vast number of businesses, it's just not. Some can't, but some who could, just the leap is so huge. So to put the pressure on businesses to say, hey, the future is working from home, actually maybe they're too far over to the right on the adoption curve to get that. So where we were saying a year or two ago, yeah, flexibility, working from home's good, take some time, work from home, work in the office, that's okay. Somebody who was a skeptic, who's been forced to do it, may well be going back to saying, do you know what, maybe occasionally we can let people from working from home. And that's an awesome place to be. Those that were the pragmatists in the adoption curve are now maybe the early adopters. So everybody's moved slightly closer, but we can't say work is working from home going forward. I don't think.
I think it's very exciting, challenges and exciting, as Jelena said. So I think that's all we've got time for today for our webinar. But I've really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you so much to all of you for joining and being our guests today. And thank you all of you watching for submitting your questions and being involved today. If you do want to get in touch, we'll be sending out an email with all the details on for all the companies that have been involved today. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the hard work in organising it. These things don't come together easily.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.